Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the Second Harvest Heartland Fee Structure Update webinar. My name is Katie and I am an Agency Relations Account Specialist at Second Harvest Heartland. Today we will have Rob Zeski, Second Harvest CEO, Michelle Heary, Field Services Director, and Kate Burgraff, Agency Relations Manager, presenting the webinar. First, I want to cover some housekeeping details. Your lines are muted, so you don't need to worry about background noise. If you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to enter them in the question box. This is located in the control panel to the right of your screen. We will also have time to answer questions aloud at the end of the webinar. So in order to do that, you'll be able to raise your hand and we will unmute your line, and then you will be able to speak to everybody on the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and accessible on Agency Zone within the next couple weeks, so watch for a the next couple hours. Watch for a follow-up email with a link to that webinar recording. And now I will go ahead and turn it over to Kate.
Hello, thank you for joining us today for our Agency Fee Update webinar. You all received an email last week communicating this information, and we wanted to provide you with some additional context for these decisions, as well as some scenarios to help you in your planning, and also allow for some space for you to ask questions as we go. I'm going to turn it over to Rob Zeski, Second Harvest Heartland CEO, to talk through the beginning of this webinar.
Good afternoon, it's Rob Zeski. Thanks so much for taking some time with us today. We really appreciate it and know this is an important topic for everyone on the call. So wanted to spend a few minutes before we talk about some of the specific changes that we are going to be proposing, that we walk a little bit through some of the background and some of the situation as we're seeing it. So everybody has a understanding about some of the changes in the emergency food system that we are seeing, as well as some of those that we think are going to be affecting our work for years to come and driving some of those changes. So a little bit what we're going to be talking about today, so everyone's clear, is we have some updates to our Second Harvest Heartland fee structure, including our shared maintenance as well as our delivery fees. It will be effective on January 4th, 2016. The new agency contract that we worked on over the past year, we worked very hard to make sure we were giving people 90 days, which was our promise, and we're trying to give people a little bit more time than that as well, knowing that there are a lot of budgeting considerations to put into all of our planning. But we really wanted to walk through, we've had several meetings already, 2 focus groups, as well as a lot of conversations with partners independently, and we've looked at a lot of scenarios with agency partners to how better focus the fees, make sure that we are reflecting the change in the mix of food that we have available. I think, as everyone knows and I hope is seeing, we have a huge volume of produce that continues to increase, and we think that's going to be part of our work going forward. We think we've seen changes to some traditional sources of food that we wanted to make sure that that we were reflecting, but also make sure that we were supporting a sustainable delivery structure. We have an obligation as Second Harvest Heartland to equitably serve partners far from the Twin Cities, as well as those right in our backyard, but also continue to share costs while we are still providing a great bargain and what we've heard from some partners of the best deal around as it relates to supporting our food shelf partners with this work. So let's talk a little bit about what's behind the updates, and want to make sure that everyone is looking at some of the same data that we are. This data on slide 3 is some of the changes that we're seeing right now. On the left side, you'll see the sources of food for Second Harvest Heartland from 2014. And for those of you that have been doing this work for a long time, I think you know that a decade or more ago, this might have been 50% federal TFAP or commodity programs, and another 50% that was shelf-stable food from sources like General Mills. And I think we certainly still see and have seen an important slice of this come from food drives, but it was a much more straightforward pie chart. And today, even in the past 7 years, the growth of retail food rescue has been enormous and has been important both in a source of new food, but also in a source of of perishable and I think disproportionately healthy food. And we're delighted to see that grow. But we also know things like retail food rescue, the produce component that you see, which is only 7%, have dramatically changed our supply chains too. And while we want that for clients that are struggling to get access to healthy foods, we know that those have had costs for every part of our supply chain, to our warehouse and our freezers and coolers and trucks, but also to your locations as well. And that has been a huge component of our growth and will continue to be a big part of our growth. As you look at the right side of this page, this is Feeding America's national expectations from kind of 2010 to 2015 and what they're seeing, and reflect a lot of what we're seeing locally, which is produce really driving the growth in our work. A lot of purchasing as well. I think we've actually seen purchase grow a little faster than that. Retail food rescue in the plus 12, but then you'll see that the federal commodities and the manufactured goods, those consumer packaged goods, shelf-stable things, from a donation standpoint, really starting to fall off. And so while we're working as hard as we can to continue to find new and creative ways for manufacturers to donate those foods, we know that many of those partners have made permanent changes to their supply chains over the course of the recession, and we're unlikely to see those continue to make a large rebound unless we see something substantive change to a tax structure for charitable gifts or some other kind of systematic changes. And so we're trying to prepare ourselves for some of those as well. And I will say the neat part, as we talk about and hear about all the time from food shelf and meal program partners, I don't think we've ever been as healthy as we are in terms of the nutritional content of food that we distribute, but we're certainly finding that some of that fantastic health benefit also comes at a cost in our supply chain. The next slide that you see here are food sources, and so you can see what Second Harvest Heartland has sourced. This is received by source from 2008 on through 2015, kind of our expected numbers for our fiscal 2015. And in addition to growth, kind of more than doubling the amount of food that we're all that we're receiving, we also see some pretty significant changes. And so the retail food rescue component, that first band, the purchase food has indeed also increased, the red band. The blue component, the manufacturers and distributors, you can see, has actually slowed or decreased just a bit, with some of our purple produce really starting to take off since 2012. So that's a little bit about how we've seen the growth in pounds driving over the past several years, and wanted to make sure you had a window into that change, which again has pretty significant impacts for all of us and how we do our collective work. One of the other things that we're seeing, and we're hearing from a lot of partners, although there's a lot of discrepancy or diversity in how this is working, we're also hearing nationally and feeling locally that there are some challenges on the fundraising side too. We've heard from some of our partners who have said, you know, the faith organizations that have been supporting us have been changing and are undergoing a significant amount of change locally. We at Second Harvest Heartland are finding that you know, many of our traditional sources, not only of manufactured food, but also fundraising support, have come from places like the Cargills, General Mills, Target, Super Value, and Cub, from the food industry. And we know from many sources, and I think you know, that the retail and the food industry is under a lot of pressure and under a lot of change right now as well, as it figures out how to react and adapt to consumer tastes. And so I think we are feeling that not only locally but regionally and nationally as we're looking forward to some of the fundraising. We also think that there is some evidence that when we look across the country, many of our peer food banks have seen a flattening of some of the donations on the individual giving side too. And I don't know how much this may be mirrored locally, but we think that there is also a sense of some decreased urgency, and really kind of starting this fall when there was a victory declared on return to pre-recession unemployment numbers and a fallback of some of the poverty rates, that in many people's minds we're back. The recovery has happened, and most of us are feeling great again. And we obviously know that we have had people who have never been able to participate fully in our economy before the recession, and we know that there are a number of people who have struggled to get back on their feet with returns to lower wages as well as to underemployment. And a number of people, I think, in the older American population who saw their nest eggs take permanent hits and will struggle for many years to be able to fully participate in a recovery that others are enjoying. And so, as we think about that, we know that we've got some long-term challenges. We are working and want to continue to work with our agency partners to get creative about how we continue to message the urgency of support for our neighbors, that we continue to message, I think, the challenges of our two economies and those that are missing out on recovery, and also the fact that given that we've never met the need for some of our neighbors, that we want to continue to push to do more and further reach those people in new ways with new assistance in a way that will help us do more for our neighbors than ever before. So I wanted to make sure that we started a conversation on that as well and understood a little bit about what we're seeing and how we're trying to make sure we're going to be proactive about work on some of the softer fundraising environment in the near term and make sure that conversation was happening with our agency partners as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Heary to talk a little bit about how we are going to be working and thinking about, given some of those trends, exactly what we're going to be doing as we look forward into the new 2016 fiscal year.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. As we were following those trends that Rob's just walked you through earlier, really as far back as this spring, we decided that internally we should bring together a working group to figure out what do we do with this in terms of our fee structure specifically. Rob has touched on a number of things we're doing in other areas, but we knew that our fee structure was one area that we did need to dive a little deeper in and look at some changes. So we put together an interdepartmental working group at Second Harvest, and we included in that members of our transportation team, our distribution center, of course the agency relations team, our finance team. And overall, the first thing we did is we said, well, what's our overarching goal here? What are we coming together around? And agreed that our long-term goal really is as simple as ensuring the financial strength and the future of Second Harvest, so that 10, 15, 25, 50 years down the road, if we need to be here and serving people who are facing food insecurity, we're here and working with our partners to get food into the system. The next thing we discussed and came to agreement on was, well, what are the guiding principles around the things we would consider doing? And the first thing we all agreed upon was that we needed to ensure that there was equity in cost sharing across our network of partners. So we were looking at, is what we're proposing fair or not, considering the differences among the many people or organizations we partner with. The second item, or the second characteristic that we were looking for, was simple and transparent, easy to understand changes. No hidden fees, if you will. Thirdly, as Rob mentioned, that a lot of what's driving this is changes in the food streams that we're working with, and so we needed to also be forward-looking and do some anticipation or projecting of how the changes we've seen to date may continue or not, and then be ahead of the curve in the fee structure that we're proposing. And then finally, we wanted to introduce some system efficiencies, so things that would help us get our invoices out more quickly, have them be simpler, allow you all perhaps some greater efficiencies in terms of budget planning, financial management throughout your fiscal year. So with the work that we did as a group, what we came up with was a menu of options that we thought were viable. But we took that menu of options then and shared it with a group of agency partners that we invited to the table. And it was a fairly representative group. It was our goal to have a representative group, and we had some technical challenges that made it a little bit harder for the outer metro folks to participate fully, but we were able to do some follow-up and get some additional input. The result of that discussion with our agency partners was that some of the options on our menu of options were deleted. We did away with them based on the feedback we got. And then we were able to refine or tweak some of the other things that did remain on the menu and that have in fact been implemented or communicated to you all and will be implemented as of January 4th. So that's an overview of the process. So you understand how we approached it was thoughtful. We invited others to the table. Next, I'd like to just share with you a handful of the data points that were most critical in terms of how we, the decisions we ended up making. So first, what we decided we needed to do was look at our performance or look at where we stand in comparison to our peers across the Feeding America network. So in this graph, you'll see this is data that covers the years 2011 through 2014. And it presents what food banks, our peer food banks, charge in the form of shared maintenance and delivery fees per pound on donated product. Second Harvest is represented on the left there in those 4 columns. And you'll see that overall the trend is that the in the aggregate, shared maintenance and delivery fees per donated pound have gone down over those 4 years. That's been true of many of the food banks, not all. Some have actually increased or had some ups and downs. But really the key take-home message in our looking at this data was that we came out as 4th lowest among our peers in terms of what we ask our agency partners to pay into the system, if you will, in terms of a cost share in the form of shared maintenance and delivery fees. After we looked at that, next slide. Okay, thanks. Perfect, great. After looking across the network and our peer agencies, we thought, well, let's bring it closer to home and actually see how we're splitting out the cost share, if you will, between Second Harvest and our agency partners. And in this slide, you'll see that there's data that we've compiled from 2008 through 2014. The green columns represent the portion of the cost that Second Harvest has assumed, and the blue represents what we have asked our partners to pay into the system. There's some fluctuation again over the years, but overall the trend in terms of what we've absorbed has increased. And then the counter view of that, what agencies have paid in, this is again total cost per pound, so this is a slightly different measure than what we just looked at. It has increased steadily but slowly over the years. Jumping ahead to 2014, if you just look at where we came out at the end of that year, Second Harvest was assuming roughly 22 cents a pound of the cost of the food, and we were asking agency partners to contribute just under 2 cents a pound. So the good news in this for us was that our goal of actually absorbing as much as possible the increased cost that was experienced from the start of the recession until recently, that we were successful in that. But again, this was just another data point that showed us that there's opportunity maybe to look at that ratio of cost share. So with that, we decided to dive a little deeper because we have been hearing from our partner agencies that their budgets have increased. What they are putting into the system in terms of dollars has increased. And so we wanted to figure out how that's playing out, where that's coming from. So this slide has a lot of data. The key things to be looking at, or key things to note, first of all, the data here is 2011 through 2014. The key column in this graph is the final column that's highlighted, which is the percent change over that time. If we look across the rows, the top rows are focusing on pounds distributed, and then the lower rows are actually looking at the dollars that agency partners have paid in the form of different fees. So we'll walk through that. First, in terms of just what are the trend lines in terms of pounds. We all have heard that, nationally, Second Harvest as a whole, et cetera, that pounds distributed are up. Let's look at that a little bit more closely. You can see down the first column, we've got purchase pounds distributed. That's up roughly 30%. Donated pounds is subdivided out both non-produce and produce pounds distributed have increased, with the bulk, though, the bulk of the increase, or the greater increase, if you will, in the line represented by produce pounds distributed. Overall, TFAP's down a little bit. You put that all together, the average pounds distributed has increased about 60%. But again, the storyline that Rob touched on in his portion here is that produce generates the bulk or the majority of that growth. So then looking at dollar streams. Purchase product is the first row across, and here we can see that agencies have been spending more on purchase product. The amount of dollars that you've put in has increased by 25%. Delivery fees have gone up a bit too, and that's 39%. That's not necessarily a per unit cost, but overall you've been spending 39% more on delivery, and shared maintenance is up a little bit at 10%. You put that all together, that in the aggregate, agency spending has increased across those years by 23%. So then the next question is roll those things together, increase in pounds and then the number of dollars spent to achieve the increased pounds distributed. So looking at the column average pounds, or I'm sorry, average dollars per pound, following that over to the final column of percent change. Across these 4 years, what we've seen is that the average dollars spent per pound has actually decreased by 22%. If we invert that, basically another way of saying it is that for every dollar that you all invest in purchasing food, you've gotten 28% more pounds for your dollar. So again, our goal in walking through some of these data points was to just show you or share with you some of the numbers behind the thinking that we were working with in terms of coming up with the actual fee changes that Kate will now walk you through, and she's going to also present some scenarios that bring it to life in a form that's going to apply to different agencies based on their purchase patterns and demand for food.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Rob. We are just going to pause for a moment before we get into the specific fee structure update information and scenarios to see if there's any questions on what Rob and Michelle have presented. There was a lot of information shared. Some of it might be new, some of it might be things that you've been experiencing already, but we want to make sure that there's some space for questions if there's any at this time.
And as a reminder, you can type in your questions in that question box. And you can also look, if you'd like to ask a question out loud, just look for that little hand icon that is in your control panel. Click on that. That will indicate to us that you'd like to be unmuted, and then I will unmute your line and let you know that you've been unmuted so you can speak.
All right, we wanted to create some space for that in case that would be helpful. Definitely, if you have questions after this webinar, there's always ways to reach us through your account specialist or by contacting me, the agency relations manager, directly. So to move through the fee changes that will be effective January 4th, this is the same grid that you received in the email communication last week, but we wanted to go over it a little bit more closely. So you'll see that there are 5 areas that will be impacted by fee changes. One of them is in produce, and this connects with some of the conversation earlier around the increased produce within our food stream and the increased costs that we're all experiencing around that. So the current is listed in the middle column, and that's a penny a pound for bulk and 2 pennies a pound for repack and encased. And then effective January 4th, you will see that in the right column. And so it's looking at 3 cents per pound for bulk and 4 cents per pound on repacked and cased produce. And as Michelle mentioned, we'll walk through some scenarios in the subsequent slides. The second item is around general shared maintenance fees. And currently, there are actually 2 typical standard maximum shared maintenance fees that you'll see on our inventory list. Typically, it's a 12 cents per pound fee for most donated product, and then for retail food rescue meat and cereal, it is 14 cents per pound. Effective in January, it will be a flat 13 cents per pound for most donated product. We'll talk through a little bit more of that in another slide as well. The third and fourth items that we're looking at connect with our delivery to your location for your orders. And so there's a standard delivery fee that comes along with when we deliver to your location. Currently, it is based on pounds, and it's a range from $15 to a max of $70. And as we look to move to a more sustainable delivery fee system, we are moving to a $40 standard delivery fee effective in January. In addition, produce drop delivery fees currently are at 0, and we will be aligning all deliveries so that all deliveries have a standard $40 delivery fee. The final item that will change is the food rescue drop delivery fee. Many of you might have local store relationships where you're picking up food rescue product from the store directly. This is not related to that. There is some food rescue product that Second Harvest picks up with our fleet of trucks, and then we deliver it to a location, and that fee is going to change in January. So currently it is $15, a range of $15 to $100 based on pounds. The range will continue in January, but it will be slightly increased with a minimum of $50 and a maximum of $150. So we estimate that as we looked back over the last 12 months of order history from the agencies within our partner agency network, we saw that on a monthly basis, 84% of agencies will experience an increase of $100 or less. There are 16% of agencies that will have an increase of over $100 per month, but it's roughly balanced out across the agency network. And some of this is definitely based on how specifically each program or each agency engages with Second Harvest. Overall, across the network, we anticipate a 3 to 4% increase based on these changes. So that's the overall picture. As we dig a little bit deeper into each of these areas, we wanted to talk a little bit more specifically around produce. And here on this slide, you'll see some examples, actually some examples that you may have received from us recently on a produce drop or on your produce subscription. And so at the top, you'll see that it just highlights again the changes overall, and then as you look down at a pallet of watermelon or a pallet of sweet corn, maybe a case of sweet corn, you can see how that change will impact starting in January. We understand that this is an increase that, that will be associated with this produce, and as we mentioned, we're hoping that we can work with you over the next 4 months and talk about different strategies as we work through this together. In addition, much of this produce is related to produce season, and so we have an even longer time frame to work together to prepare for produce season next year. As it relates to the general shared maintenance fees, you'll see that really the shift in this area probably won't be that significant when we look at it on a case-by-case basis. So here are some items that are currently on our inventory list that you may be interested in ordering, and you can see the adjustment per case that you'll see. So some items will have a slight increase, and then some items will have a slight decrease depending on if they were at 14 cents or 12 cents. And then just as a reminder around the shared maintenance fee, of course, 13 cents will become the new standard maximum, but there may be some exceptions to that. There are always products that might have a short shelf life that we receive that we might continue to price lower to encourage it to move quickly so that it can move out to clients and be used while it's still good. And then as we explore new food streams, there might be new products that are priced higher than 13 cents a pound. Some of you may remember some produce that we actually sourced from other states, and that product came in a little bit higher than 13 cents a pound due to the logistics of getting it here and getting it out to individuals in need. As we look at the standard delivery fee, we wanted to highlight that for some of you, movement to the $40 standard delivery fee might actually be a decrease in cost for you, or it may be an increase depending on the typical poundage of your order that you're currently placing with Second Harvest. And so here are some different scenarios based on what you might be ordering now, the pounds of your order, and how it will move into the new system. And in addition to that, we've had some questions about how delivery fees operate, and we just want to make sure that we're clear on how we're processing delivery fees. So delivery fees are currently calculated based on the size of all orders that are delivered to a specific delivery address on a specific delivery date. And what we will be shifting to is that as of January 4th, delivery fees will be charged per delivery, regardless of the size of the orders for delivery. But they will continue to be assessed on all orders to a specific delivery address on a specific delivery date. And so around this, I would really encourage you to reach out to your account specialist to talk about your specific situation, depending on the number of programs that your agency has and the number of deliveries and types of deliveries that you receive in a given week or a given month. Connected with that, there are some changes that agencies that have produce drops will experience with the January 4th changes. And so here I've highlighted some different size of produce drops that you may be accessing from Second Harvest. And it could be as small as a pallet or two that could include produce or bakery, and it could be as large as 10 pallets of produce. And so as we think about those produce drops, we have to factor in not only the fee change around the per pound cost of produce, but also the delivery fee that will be added on if that's the delivery, the only delivery that you're receiving that day. So you can see based on the different quantities how that change might shift as we go into the next calendar year. Also, I would want to highlight at this point that currently the bakery is free, and it will continue to be free in January. So at this time, we'd like to open it up to any additional questions that you might have about how these might be impacting your agencies or your programs, or if you have specific questions about a scenario that is connected with your agency, we'd love to answer them now, or we can definitely follow up with them afterwards.
Okay, Mary from the Salvation Army has a question here. Mary, go ahead, you're unmuted. Seems like we might be having a little trouble hearing you, Mary. If you want to go ahead and type in your question, I can read it out loud. Okay, if you have mixed items, what would the cost be? And Mary, are you referring to mixed food rescue items? Or maybe the mixed dry goods, just any? Okay, so like the mixed dry goods, yep.
Yep, great question. So if we're talking about the product that is sometimes available on our inventory list, which is mixed donated product, that would align with the 13 cents per pound shared maintenance fee. I believe that currently it is 12 cents per pound when it's available. If we're talking about something else, then please let us know and we can respond to that. All right, if there isn't any additional questions at this time, then we're going to close the end of the webinar. I think I'd just like to encourage all of you to make sure that you are in contact with us if you have any additional questions. We want to make sure that we can work with your organizations as we make this transition together.
Kate, we have a question here from Kathy at Department of Indian Works. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you're going to send the PowerPoint out.
Great question, thanks. So a couple items to that note. We have recorded the webinar, and so we are going to be sharing a link not only with all of you that attended the webinar, but also with our full partner network. And then in addition to that, we can make a PDF of the PowerPoint available upon request. So if it would be helpful as you're having these conversations within your organization around your budget and planning, we can definitely make that available to you. All right. Just a reminder, we will follow up to all of you with an email with some additional information and a link to that webinar, recording of the webinar. Feel free to reply back to it if you have any additional questions, and we look forward to working with you over the next 4 months as we prepare for this transition.